Well, today's video is about these Circium Rivularae Altropupurium. What a mouthful, no wonder so few of us can actually remember its full genus name. Common name for this obviously is plume thistle, and so much easier to remember. And isn't it a beauty? Flowering here in Norfolk in early June. It's been flowering since late May. Very easy plant to grow. Likes a slightly acid soil, but will tolerate both clay and sand. Has masses of these absolutely wonderful thistle-like flowers that are just a lovely treat for these bees. All the pollinators are attracted to these. They're a really great addition to your garden to attract wildlife and particularly pollinating insects. We're growing them here, clump of 3 plants. They're usually recommended as a filler for herbaceous borders. They do die down to a clump each autumn, and the flower spikes, as you can see here, are held at around 3.5 feet tall, although the highest one in the center of this is approximately 6 feet. They give a really good display, a lot of flowers per clump. They do need quite a bit of space to grow, as you can see, very pointed flower clumps held above these leaves, which are deeply serrated. Form a clump approximately 3 feet across and 3 feet tall. We've got them planted a little close to the front of the border in this situation, and they could really do with going a bit further back. They're recommended for middle towards the rear of most herbaceous borders, but they're working very well here, planted as they are, coming through this 6 Hills giant catmint on the front of this borders, but they are overpowering, as you can see, peonies and roses which are planted around them. Now the stems, the flower stems, hold multiple stems of flower, and as you can see, if I come in close, I'll use this one as an example. Terminal flower bud with 3 flowers, and then lower down at each leaf joint, again, further flower buds emerging from the leaf point. These are thistle-like. They have got thorns almost on the leaves at the junctions, and they are quite uncomfortable if you're working bare-legged in a border of plume thistles. Very easy, and I often get these mixed up with canassias, and I'm just going to show you very briefly. We've got canassias growing in this border as well, because at first glance from a distance they do look very, very similar. So let's just show you an example of a canassia. Okay, just for comparison, a canassia. Different leaf form, much more open, but again deeply serrated. You can see how the confusion would be easily made from a distance, because the flower palette itself, the colour, is almost identical to the Cirsium. Held at about the same height. These are, in this garden, standing between 3.5, 4 up to 5 feet. Also a great one for bees, this. Much more open habit and a much smaller crown. Dense, less dense foliage, more open, more upright, but exactly the same flower palette. And let me just get in close on that, so you've got real detail on the canassia. See, it's slightly different form in the flower, less thistle-like, opens more as a sort of platform for the plants rather than that thistle-like flower. So let's go back to the Cirsium and just talk a little bit more about those now. Okay, back to the Cirsium or plume thistle. As you can see, the clump is much more dense. Foliage is more thick, much heavier, longer, bigger leaf, and it's spreading out much further than the canassia. A much bigger, more substantial plant, and as such why this one's better planted slightly further back. But in terms of the volume of flower and the flower height, Cirsium just outstretches the canassia by a couple of inches, and as I can show you, those on side elevation thistle-like flowers really does look like the wild thistle. Now this plant isn't wild in the United Kingdom. It is in parts of Western Europe, but this is a cultivar that's sold in garden centres for growing as a herbaceous hardy perennial here. Best divided in either late spring or early autumn. They will seed if they are let to do so and not deadheaded or cut back. but they tend to get a bit scrappy towards the end of the season, and we tend to deadhead these quite early on and remove any flower heads that are running to seed, try and encourage those lower growths that you can see the flower is still developing. If I show you down into the center of the plant, by cutting out those long primary flower stalks, you get a secondary flush with Cirsium later into end of July and even into August. So you can keep these going with water and feed right the way through to the early autumn, and we have done that with these quite successfully in previous years.